It's amazing what getting a job will do to you. I was still taking classes at IU, but the Bloomington Police Department had already given me a call and confirmed that I was going to be hired in a few months. My first full-time job. At the time, I was working as a part-time officer for IUPD while going to school, and I was making about $7 an hour. That was great, because at the time, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. Even then, paying rent, putting gas in a car, and eating was about all I could afford. That call changed everything. In just a couple of months, I was going to be making $41,000 a year as a first-year officer. That might not sound like much, but in today's money, that would be over $86K a year, and I don't think anyone would sneeze at that salary for a rookie. That's when my buddy hit me up. Want to go to Florida for spring break? Silly question. But in the past, I didn't have any money, and while I still didn't have any money, I had a big-time job coming, and I had this little plastic thing in my pocket I had just picked up. A credit card. I wouldn't recommend putting a week's spring break vacation on a credit card. That was just the beginning of my troubles. Right after swearing in, I bought my first brand new car. No more barely running rust buckets, but a nice, shiny, brand new Geostorm sports car. Don't judge me. It was a budget sports car coming in at $12,000. See, I was being frugal. And just to put it in perspective, that would be just under $30,000 in today's money. My spending habits didn't get any better. As a matter of fact, I look back on about my first decade of policing and wonder, where did all my money go? It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Financial stability isn't something that comes natural to cops. As a matter of fact, my story isn't unusual. Actually, I did a pretty good job compared to some of the things we see new officers do with their money. Since I decided to focus this season on retirement, I knew that I had to talk to a financial planner, someone who understood not only money, but the special issues that money brings to cops, and ultimately, how to retire. So I reached out to Nick Doherty at Financial Cop. Nick is the president-owner at Financial Cop LLC and Serve and Protect Financial Texas, a full-service, fiduciary-only financial service firm owned and operated by first responders for first responders. They are also the largest financial wellness training group for first responders nationally, having taught over 30,000 first responders from over 3,000 agencies, police academies, and conferences nationwide. Currently, Nick is a reserve officer for the Grand Prairie Police Department after 14 and a half years as a full-time officer and sergeant. Nick, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Honored to be here today, sir.
As we get started, how did you get into law enforcement and how did you get into financial planning?
Well, I got into law enforcement in a roundabout way. I had never thought I'd ever be a cop. And at the time when I was about 21, I was living with my best friend at the time. We were roommates, and he went through the police academy at a local agency here in the North Texas region and became a cop and started watching what he was doing. I was selling senior trips to high school kids at the time, and I was getting kind of sick and tired of the back and forth waffling of seniors in high school. And I thought, he sure is having a lot of fun at this. This would be something I might be interested in. So I literally went and applied for about 8-9 different agencies. And I was blessed to be asked by the Grand Prairie Police Department to become a cop. They were the first to say yes. So that's how I became a cop. When it comes to getting into the financial world, I got a PhD in doing stupid stuff with money. I didn't get my degree in finance. I got my degree in criminal justice because the Grand Prairie Police Department gave me $100 a month if I got a degree. And it actually starts back when I was a kid in high school. I grew up in a town called Irving in North Texas, and we grew up on the south side of Irving, which was not the nice side per se. Came from a middle-class, lower kind of neighborhood in the sense of my dad was a blue-collar worker. I paint contractor his whole life. My mom worked in the retail world. They worked their butts off to make sure we had everything we had as kids, but we didn't exactly have the life of luxury. And so when it came time for me to get my first car, I had to go get a job at a grocery store and wasn't making much. So I bought a 1989 Ford Festiva, put a couple $1,000s worth of stereo equipment into it, and called myself Basing Bubbles because that's about what I look like if you don't know what a Festiva looks like. And from there, I went to college and got my first credit card, went into credit card debt and built a credit score, which taught me that you don't have to have a bubble. You can go finance a car. So I financed a 1993 Honda Civic Coupe, dropped about $2,000 with a stereo in it, ended up getting offered a job to sell senior trips and was making $48,000 a year plus commission in 1999. I actually took a pay cut to become a cop, so I had to have a car that reflected that salary. So I bought a 2001 Honda Accord Coupe, dropped $5,000 worth of stereo into that. You're seeing a little bit of a theme. And thought I had a cool car stereo, so I went to a car audio competition and realized my car sucked. And so I decided to spend $21,000 on a car stereo to be a competitive car audio competitor. Dumbest thing I ever did. And so tore the car up, ended up buying other cars. And before you knew it, I was a rookie cop and I was $80,000 in debt, all almost on credit cards and cars. And I was drowning myself in debt. But more importantly, I was drowning myself mentally in the overtime cycle that I got stuck in.
So many people just related to you in that little story you gave. I mean, isn't that like the typical rookie cop? They get their job and they go out and buy the $80,000 pickup truck with all the special rims and everything.
Yeah, we call it the FTO starter pack, right? We get out of the academy, we get a big old fat truck or a sports car, we get a tattoo, we buy a rifle, we date a nurse, a teacher, or a dispatcher, and we're broke.
Yep, you've pretty much nailed it. Yeah. So how did you get out of all of that?
I was very fortunate. I had a beat partner when I got released from training that was a 20-year vet that became one of my best friends and still is to this day. And he was that cop that would go car to car and pound financial wellness into the recruits' heads. And at the time we were on evening shift, which started at 3 p.m. And that happened to be what time Dave Ramsey's show came on. And I fell in love with his debt snowball. And it's a good thing I did because I was dating this gorgeous girl named Carrie at the time. And Carrie's title had recently changed from girlfriend to fiance. And I kind of forgot to tell her this important information about being in debt. And of course, she was debt free. So I had to explain to her that the guy she wanted to marry was $80,000 in debt. But I looked at her and said, "Don't worry, Carrie, I got a plan." Of course, she looked at me back and said, "You better." And I told her that I was going to use this debt snowball and I was going to work as many hours of overtime as I could to pay off all of our debt before we got married. So over the next 24 months, I literally worked over 1,000 hours of overtime. And on March 3rd, 2007, we got married, 100% consumer debt free, everything but the house.
That's fantastic. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey too. Now I found him later in life after I had, ridden those credit card payments for years and years and years and looking to buy a house, getting ready to start a family and realized that kind of smacked in the face that I got to change the way I'm doing things. And I really latched on to some of the things that he was saying and really appreciated it. How come that message, and Dave's not the only one giving that kind of message, but how come that message is so hard for young people to hear?
It's even harder now because we have such an entitlement society. And there's two things that I've studied extensively since getting involved in this movement. The first is millionaires. You'd be amazed at how millionaires truly live. And the second is I really deep dived into how debt is marketed. And it is amazing how much they market this stuff to us. Heck, they start marketing to our kids at the age of 1 through strategic credit card marketing toys. And so we've taken something that, 50, 60 years ago, your parents and your great grandparents, they thought that debt was a sin. And now we have to put a Coca-Cola from a vending machine on a credit card because we get brownie points. And they've completely tricked us into thinking that we can beat them at their game, even though we can't. And the reality is it's caused us to become such a consumer-driven society that it's if you think about the Christmas commercials from the car commercials, right? You deserve to have that new car. All that stuff has just driven us to spend instead of the old way, which was, if your grandparents wanted a car, they saved money and went and wrote a check for a car.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it? When you think about it, you just pay for cash for your stuff.
And we've completely transformed to that in a period of 50 years.
Now, everybody faces these kind of financial issues and challenges. I mean, it's not just police, but I feel like for some reason, police have some additional challenges that they face. And maybe it's because of the shift work. Maybe it's because of, overtime issues, or maybe it's because of the way in which things are targeted towards police. Do you feel, or do you see that there are some specific challenges that law enforcement have that regular people don't?
There are a lot, and one of the biggest first challenges we have in law enforcement is that we're hiring these kids at 22, 23 years of age, and we're turning them into lottery winners. I mean, in a major metropolitan area, like in North Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area right now, my average starting salary for a cop is in the mid 80,000 range, and we're topping out at over 110,000 a year. And so you take a kid that came from nothing, we double their salary, we give them access to unlimited overtime and zero resources to teach them about the money that they're making. And it's no wonder why we do stupid stuff with money. And so that's the first aspect of law enforcement. The second one is more psychological. For your audience and for you, I'm assuming some of you guys out there have heard of this great author called Dr. Kevin Gilmartin.
Oh, yeah.
Where he talks about the hypervigilance state. And part of the psychological aspect of this is we spend an entire week of working and going, hypervigilant, depressed, and then we get off duty. And you know what? If you go buy an $80,000 truck, that's going to feel pretty good, right? That's going to get you out of that depressed state until the car payments start to come. And so sometimes psychologically, we turn to retail therapy to get us out of that depressed mode without understanding the domino effects that's triggered because of the psychological aspect of it.
I'm very familiar with the emotional roller coaster, but until right now, I never really considered that as tied into retail therapy. But that makes perfect sense. I've done that myself. It's terrible.
Yep. Oh, and again, the marketing kicks in too, right? I mean, that's why we now have 2 Amazon Prime weeks, not 1.
Right. Now, as officers that are out there that are looking for retirement, and you talked about your buddy who's banging on all the doors, telling all the rookies that they need to start planning for retirement. When should you start planning for retirement, and is it ever too late?
It's never too late. So I start our financial wellness training out with a quote. It says, "No excuses. It doesn't matter where you've been. It only matters where you're going." If you keep the stinking thinking mentality, you're going to keep getting stinking thinking throughout your life. And if you wait 4 or 5 years to start planning for retirement because of the poor, pitiful old little man me syndrome, all you've lost is 4 or 5 years, right? It doesn't change it. It just makes it tougher. And we tell recruits that they should start planning for retirement from day one. Now, the way we talk about and planning retirement is a lot different because there's a lot of things that you should be doing differently as a rookie versus mid-level versus close to retirement versus holy moly, I got to catch up mode.
And that's about how much you should be investing and where you should be investing that money.
Yes and no. We are weird in the sense of financial planners in the sense and financial wellness instructors. We're preached, and again, this is part of marketing, right? From early age, we are hammered. You need to start putting money into retirement accounts. The younger you are, the better this is. Part of that is because in the financial planning world, most financial planners are broke and they don't make money if you don't invest. And so we have some odd rules. You don't put money into retirement accounts until you are at least credit card debt free and any other high interest payments free. We talk about, I give you a good example, right? I'm also a financial advisor. We manage hundreds of millions of dollars in retirement accounts. And so I know a little bit about how to work within the stock market. And I have a stock tip for your audience that will guarantee them a 28% on average rate of return in the market every year with zero risk. It's called paying your credit cards off. The average credit card interest in America right now is sitting at 28%. And so if you have $3,000 in credit card debt and you pay that off, you just made 28%. We always tell people, you always pay off credit cards before you retire. And any financial advisor that tells you otherwise is more concerned about their pocketbook than they are yours. And that's the thing as rookies we got to factor in is, yes, we do need to focus on saving for retirement, but not until our financial health and our foundation is strong to build that retirement.
You talked about credit cards and it's so correct because I had credit card issues and credit card problems. I got those all paid off. And while I still use credit cards today, it's paid off every month. I never carry a balance on any credit card ever. So I don't really look at that percentage rate that much. But recently my daughter was getting some credit card stuff. She's 20, she's in college, and I was looking at that. And when I saw the percentage rates on these credit cards today, it blew my mind. Those are huge numbers.
It is highway robbery practically.
So you're talking about a different look than most financial advisors. Then what type of financial planning services would you recommend cops to look for?
So you want to find somebody that has the heart of a teacher. So you asked earlier, how did I get into financial planning? And I didn't tell the whole story. I got interested in financial planning because I got out of debt. And when I became debt free, I built a fully funded emergency fund. At that point, you're supposed to go meet with financial advisors and start looking at the investment side. And I remember me and Carrie walked into a bunch of different financial advisors' offices, and we sat through their whole spiel, and we got done. And Carrie goes, "Which one are we going to go with?" And I said, "None of those bozos."
Yeah.
She looked at me and she goes, "What do you mean, Carrie?" I said, "Carrie, they didn't have the heart of a teacher. We work too hard for our money just to blindly give it to somebody because they've got a title or they work for somebody that has their name on the side of a football stadium." And she goes, "So what are we going to do?" I said, "I have to go teach myself the entire stock market, Carrie." And so I did. I went and taught myself the entire financial world so that I could sit down across the table from these people and have an educated conversation. And that's what really kind of sparked the movement that we've started in this sense, because then all the cops at my department were starting to ask about how our pension worked and our deferred comp worked. And fast forward to 2011, we got a new chief named Steve Dye, and he asked me to start teaching financial wellness to the recruits. And we're now, we've taught over 40,000 cops from 4,000 agencies across this country. And it's been an honor to become the voice of financial wellness when it comes to that. So when it comes to investing, that's my first thing I tell people is you have to become educated about this stuff to be able to understand what you're investing in. You work too hard for your money just to blindly trust somebody.
I want to thank you for doing just that, for teaching cops and going out there and pushing that financial health and wellness to officers, because too many agencies don't do that. And too many, as you said, the younger officers, those rookies that are coming in, going through their FTO programs, they're getting taught all this important stuff and how to stop cars and how to write reports and how to search buildings, but they're never told how to take care of their money and how to take care of themselves in the long run. So thank you for going out and sharing and teaching all of that. You also said something in there that was interesting that I want to circle back to. You talked about pensions. And when I went out and started talking to some financial managers and some financial planning people when I was looking towards retirement, what I realized really quickly is very few of them understood pensions.
Almost none of them do. And that's a problem. And, then we end up taking advice from somebody that's just kind of guessing or doesn't really know. And we always tell people when it comes to the financial world, my favorite quote from Ronald Reagan is trust but verify. Just because somebody you trust tells you to do something doesn't mean you're absolved from the duty to verify with your pension companies that you can do what you can do. And there's a ton of resources out there with that. And probably one of my favorite modules in the class we teach is not very liked by the financial planning world, but it's called How to Interrogate Financial Advisors. And we teach the cops the tough questions to ask, just like you would an interrogation on the street, where you already know some of the answers, so you can make them squirm if they're trying to be a little squirrely, or they can invoke some trust because they're like, holy moly, these people are being upfront. But you can't just go to a financial advisor and have them go over your pension and assume they know what they're talking about, right? When people work with us, we are widely known as subject matter experts in pensions because we're all cops that do this.
Right.
But I still tell people, you can trust me all day long. That does not absolve you from the fact that you better verify what I'm saying is actually factual.
And of course, pensions are different in every state. Sometimes even municipalities have different pensions. And why do financial planners struggle with that? Why do people that aren't in that public safety world have a difficulty understanding pensions?
It's the same reason if you have an accident and somebody's high on drugs, you want a drug recognition expert working that, not necessarily just your standard patrol cop. They're not specialized in that. And so it's not what they do every day. Now, a lot of financial advisors kind of partake in what we call the shotgun effect. They will work with anybody that has a pulse that walks through the door. So they never really get the chance to specialize in one specific area. So they may be working with a cop, a firefighter, a teacher, somebody that works in the corporate world at millions of different companies. And that's one of the things that we've done differently is that we only specialize and only work with, we call it our first responder nexus, right? You have to have a connection to the first responder world, whether it's a kiddo or a parent or a family member with that. And so that's allowed us to really kind of hone in on the pensions. And although there are a lot of different pensions, municipalities, states, locals, you name it, all that stuff, for the most part, they're pretty similar across the board. They look a lot different. It's just because they have a lot of different terminology that really means the same thing if you know what you're talking about.
So some states and some municipalities have eliminated those pensions or turned them into stock market-based 401ks with very little guaranteed. How is that affecting retirement for those officers? And is that pattern across the U.S. or not?
It's a pattern. You're seeing that in governmental space, the pension is not dying per se. It's sick in certain situations. It's going away in a lot of places. I wouldn't say sick. There are a lot of very healthy pensions. The problem is that it's more cost effective for police departments and fire departments across the country to go to a 401k plan than it is to do a pension. Pensions are very expensive, and it's kind of like the healthcare side of this. And in the private world, when you retire from a company, you don't get to keep their health insurance. We're seeing that go away across the country for cops and firefighters as well, just because of that model mode into it. And the problem is that when you go to a 401k model, you put the onus of the retirement savings on the actual employee, which means you got to do certain things and be a little bit more honed into what your strategies and your plans are versus a pension. I mean, in my department, I got hired. I didn't have a choice. I saw 7% of my check, leave my check every check, and there was nothing I could do to stop that.
Right.
And so we get so set in our ways in our paycheck that we get on a biweekly or monthly basis. And you start by doing 1% of your check or $50 a check. And then it hurts to do more because you're so used to that paycheck. And then we end up looking up and we're like, oh, I'm doing 5% of my check to retirement. I'm doing really good. And the reality is if you're not doing 15 to 20% of your check over the long term, you're going to have a tough time retiring, and it's causing cops to have to work longer, or worse yet, they just don't ever have the chance to retire, which is what we see a lot of when we have cops that are just stuck in a 401k type plan.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that I've seen. Far too many officers I've seen are saying, I'm retiring. And then the next day they're back at work and you're like, well, and they said, I can't afford it.
Yep.
I'm curious, what does retirement look like for most officers across the U.S.?
It is a lot different than it used to be. Back in the day, the old saying in law enforcement was, I'm going to do 30, 35 years. Then it turned to 30, then it was 25. And heck, now people are just trying to get to 20. All right. It's a tough industry to be in. And when it comes to retirement, the reality is most cops are not retiring. Heck, most Americans are not retiring anymore. Why? We just get bored.
Yeah, I think I saw a number that said only a third of police officers are actually retiring now.
Yep. You get bored, and to me, that there's a new definition of retirement in the first responder world that we preach. You retire and you go back to work because you want to, not because you have to. And if your boss makes you mad, just walk out the door. That to me is the definition of retirement now, is being able to go back to work because you want to keep your time occupied so that we could not, wither away in on a couch watching something or other in essence. But you're doing so because you want to, not because you have to. And ironically, if you're in that position, you will only go work or do things that you're extremely passionate about. Maybe it's not work, maybe it's volunteerism, right? But you're only going to do something that you're passionate about, which helps keep us frankly alive, right? The ones that go retire and just sit on a couch are the ones that we see dying quickly.
Now, you also said something earlier I want to circle back to, because that's another area that I see a lot of officers are struggling with, is that health insurance. How is that impacting financial planning for officers?
Number one reason why first responders don't retire in this country is health insurance. And it's a big problem. There are some really good organizations out there that are working heavily on this. I know the FOP National is working heavily on this in that space. There are some companies out there now that are starting to specialize in healthcare insurance for first responder specific stuff, but there really isn't a good answer right now for health insurance just because it's so expensive. But it's a massive issue in the financial planning aspect because of that. And we actually have some programs that we're working with some agencies that allow you to start to save for health insurance from day one, and or do it as a lump sum check at the end of your career as well.
So is this something that you could pay in while on the job and then into that health insurance or long-term health plan, and then that carry over after retirement?
Yep. It's think of it kind of like a healthcare Flextra account, or a Flextra account used for medical expenses that stays with you for the rest of your life, even after retirement, that can be used for those kinds of things.
That sounds very interesting. I know a lot of people are probably liking the idea of that, or at least thinking of it as a possibility. So looking at, a lot of changes with financial, a lot of issues going on. If you could wave a magic wand, if you could do one thing to help with retirement for officers across the United States, what would it be?
Get them to understand that the number one important thing to learn how to retire and do anything in your life financially is the monthly budget. I know that's not the answer you thought I was going to say either.
Actually, no, it doesn't surprise me at all because, just having control of your finances,
Yeah.
just being in control as opposed to being out of control, a lot of times is the first step to actually being successful in anything.
So we have cops call us from all across the country almost every day. And the first thing they always ask is my pension going to be enough to retire on? And my number one answer is no clue. But
Right.
but what does your budget tell you? And they say, what do you mean budget? We tell first responders that you should be doing a budget 12 months prior if you haven't ever done one before, right? You should be doing it right now regardless. But when you get 12 months before your retirement, your first budget every month you do is your normal budget on your regular income. Your second budget you do every single month is your normal bills you pay on your pension income that you're estimated to make. It will tell you if you can afford to retire. It'll tell you if you need to get a part-time job or a full-time job. It'll tell you, all right, I'm short $2,000 a month with my pension, but I have X amount of money in my deferred comp account or my 401k. And now we can calculate if that will fill that deficiency up. The budget is the number one path to retirement because it helps you understand your spending, especially going into retirement under a fixed income, even more so if you don't have a COLA attached to your pension or you're not eligible for Social Security.
Another challenge that I have, and I know I'm not unusual from in the public safety world, is upon retiring, I took up a job as consulting and teaching. So I went from a fixed income to a non-fixed income.
Yep.
Even though I still have that retirement, a bulk of what I make every year, I have no idea what I'm going to make from month to month.
Yep.
I sometimes don't know if I'm getting paid next week or not. That was a huge challenge for me. Is that something that you're seeing? And also, it also means that planning for retirement doesn't stop at retirement, does it?
Nope, it does not. So what you're talking about is what we call an irregular income. And we do this a lot with realtors because a lot of cops want to go in the realtor world afterwards.
Sure. Yeah.
It's feast or famine. When you do that, it becomes tough to budget because you don't have a normalized income, but there is a way to normalize your income. And that's by taking the money you make as a consultant or if you're commission based, putting it into a separate checking account and evaluating on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis what's in that checking account and paying yourself a regular routine income. So for instance, if you're going to make $10,000 over the next 6 months and you've got that $10,000 in there, well, for the next quarter, you can pay yourself roughly $1,500 a month, right? Or $1,000, or give yourself a buffer. Because if the next 6 months you only make $8,000, you don't want to get to the point where like, crap, I was paying myself $1,500 a month and now I got to pay myself $1,200. And if you have a really, really good quarter or a good half year, and all of a sudden you look up and you're like, holy moly, I didn't make $10,000, I made $30,000. Well, now you got a choice to make. You can pay yourself a one-time lump sum bonus, or you can say, you know what, for the next 12 months, I'm going to pay myself $2,500 a month instead. And then on the first of the month or the 15th or 30th or whatever day of the month you want to, you transfer that monthly regular income into your regular checking account. And that helps you normalize your budget without going, crap, I didn't make any money for 2 months because of the consulting job.
I like that idea. I've not done that, but I think I'll start doing that now. That sounds fantastic. What else, again, we talk about the thing you want to do and with that budget. Any other advice that I haven't asked you about that the officers out there need to hear and need to know?
Budget is the crucial thing. As you go into retirement, one of the biggest paths to success in retirement is having no debt. When you have no payments, your monthly budget isn't dependent on debt payments. And so it lowers the potential need to take money out. The third is to make sure you have a fully funded 3 to 6 month emergency fund so that when that car breaks down, you're not raiding retirement accounts to fix the car. You're using your savings. We don't want our retirement savings to be used for everyday emergencies. We want it to be used because I want to go on a cruise, or I want to buy a bass boat, or I want to do something fun with it. Now, if you got to use it for emergencies here and there, that's okay. But we don't want it to be the number one go-to Murphy repellent account type scenario.
Right. It makes perfect sense. Nick, this has been fantastic, extremely helpful. If my listeners wanted to get a hold of you, to reach out, to talk to you about your services, how would they go about doing that?
So you can always find us on the web at financialcop.com. And you can also follow us on just about every social media platform and YouTube at Financial Cop as well. That's the easiest way to either follow us or get a hold of us.
And I think there's some disclaimers you need.
Oh yeah, you know those good old for you cops that sit out there and listen to the Good Time Radio on Saturday. You get to hear this every Saturday when they do the little quick reading. I don't read as fast as they do, but I do have to give a disclaimer. So here it goes. Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investments advice. The views expressed are for informational purposes only and are not designed to advise you on how to handle anything specific to your finances. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and don't take into account your specific financial situation and or needs. Always consult with your investment professionals before making important investment decisions. Always consult with a CPA for tax advice regarding anything with your income taxes. Advisory services are offered through Retirement Plan Advisors, LLC, a federally registered investment advisor. RPA and Financial Cop, LLC are not affiliated. Whew, quick as I can do it.
Hey, Nick, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me, sharing with our listeners some of these ideas and thoughts about finances and financial planning for their future. And again, just thanks for your time.
Yep, anytime.
And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.